What is up today, guys? Today we're doing something friggin' awesome, and we are going to go through the entire process of modeling and rigging a T-Rex. Now this is going to be a pretty basic model, nothing too extreme or anything like that. However, it's going to be friggin' awesome and in the same style as my T1s. So we're going to call this my T2, my T-Rex, Tetrad 2, whatever we're going to do. It's T2. Alrighty, so throughout this entire video there's going to be numerous steps. Well over 30 steps. I'm guessing over 35 steps in this whole process. There are timestamps in the description in case you need just a certain spot or you watched some earlier and you're catching up. Timestamps down there. And yeah, like I said, we're going to model this and go through step by step on how to rig it to, have a very nice and animatable T-Rex, or you can apply these rigging skills to your own characters or whatever. So this is what we're going to do for this video. We're going to have fun and make something awesome. So let's go ahead and get into it. So now that the model is done, my first step is going to be to rename all of my geometry. Now a lot of people do this as they go. With this character, with this T-Rex here, I didn't really do that. I went for it. I used all cubes except for one sphere for the neck. A lot of people do it. I just didn't. Sometimes I do it. This one I just happen to not. So yeah, we're gonna rename geometry, and you want to make it something pretty dang simple, like top tooth number 1. Now you could go super in depth and be like back molar, and you could front tooth, whatever. I'm just going top tooth 1, top tooth 2, and I'm working left to right. That way, it's like reading a book. I don't know, it makes sense to me. And since I'm going to be the only one using this, I'm making it simple for me, and that's kind of what you want to do. You want to make it simple for whoever's going to be using it. Now, I'm sure if you work at like a company or you work with a team or something, you'll have a certain standard for naming conventions and stuff. For me, this is, this will work. It's just a personal project. Another thing to note, if you have multiples of things, like example, the teeth again, or the tail or whatever, you can name it, tail 1, copy that, and then just select the next part of your tail, paste it, and you don't even have to change the number. It'll just automatically update the number to the next one in the sequence. So it'll put tail 2, tail 3. So you don't always have to delete the number if everything else is the exact same. That's awesome, and if it messes up, you'll know that you don't have something named quite right somewhere else. So it's a good way to kind of check yourself too. Alrighty, so the next step is to freeze transforms, center pivots, and delete history. That way all of our geometry is clean, it all has its resting place, and all that good stuff. So, you could go through here and click on each individual piece of geometry, but we have an awful lot of them, and that would just take a lot of time. Alrighty, so we're going to highlight it all, go up to Modify, then we're going to Freeze Transforms, watch the right side of the screen in the channel box, and boom, transformations are frozen. We're going to go edit, delete by type history, and all of our inputs are gone. Boom. And then we're going to go modify and center pivots. All pivots are centered to their objects. Now I can click anywhere on this thing, and all of my numbers in the channel box are 0. And everything is awesome. Alrighty, so the next step, super simple. We're just gonna highlight all of the geometry and Command G to group it all, and I'm gonna call this T-Rex Geo. That way we know where all the geo is. Alrighty, so for this next part, we're going to draw the back joints. So let's do it. To get to the joints, you need to change your tab from modeling, which is what it's probably on, to rigging. And then you'll go up to the skeleton tab at the very top. And there is your Create Joints button. Click it. Now you have the tool active. Alrighty, so we're going to go into our side orthographic view just so that we can easily draw joints, otherwise it's difficult. And all you have to do is click, and you've created a joint. And if you hold down Shift, and click in a straight line, you can create a perfectly straight line of joints. Now, I drew 8 joints, even though I only needed 7, and that's just because I miscounted and I drew a joint for the neck when I'm just drawing joints for the back right now. But I fixed it later on, so we are all good there. Now you'll see that the joints are really hard to see, so if you go up to the Display tab and then go to Animation and Joint Size, you'll get the joint display scale. You can just crank it up just so that you can see the joints a little bit better, and this won't affect the joint itself. It just affects how we see it, like how big it is. It doesn't change anything about the joint. It just makes it easier for us. So anyway, I have my joints. I'm in the orthographic side view. So I'm going to grab my first joint that I made and rotate it so that it gets my main spine, I guess you would call it, inside my dinosaur's back. And it is perfectly okay to translate X. Now you can see I have my spine rotated, so I can't exactly translate an X perfectly. So what I did was I selected the joint and then just went up to the channel box and middle moused. So then for the next part, I was rotating my joints and using that middle mouse translate X trick to get each joint in the middle of its own piece of geometry, because the way I'm going to rig it is one joint will control that whole little slab of the spine. Okay, now that they are in line, I highlighted them all and I went up to Modify and Freeze Transforms. Just because, you know, gotta freeze them transforms. Okay, now it's time to name all of our joints. And the naming convention goes where it's placed on your character. So, for example, for the spine, center, it's in the center of the character, so CT underscore, and then what part is it controlling? The back, in this case, so CT underscore back, and then this is our first joint, so O1, and it's going to be a bind joint. Now we're going to do that all the way through, O2, O3, O4, and these are all binds, until we get to the very last one. And like I said, I created one more joint and I went back and fixed it. But when we get to the last one, so it's going to be CT underscore back underscore 08. I eventually changed it to 7, but then underscore waist, because this one is there just to complete the spine, but it's not going to be animated or anything. It's not going to rotate. The joint before it is going to influence this joint. This joint won't do anything really. So it's a waist, but it has to be there. Alrighty, so now we're going to make the hip joint, and to do that, we are simply just going to grab this guy, we're going to duplicate it, and now you see we have all this junk down here. The hip joint's pretty much just going to be a duplicate of our back bind joint, and they're going to sit right on top of each other, so we don't need bind joints 2 through 7. We're going to delete those. Now we have this single joint that is resting on its back bind joint, and it's going to be the hips. We're going to rename this. I'm going to get rid of that 1 right there. We're going to change back to hip. So since these sit perfectly on each other, we're going to grab the hip joint. We're already selected. Then we go over to the radius over here in the channel box. We're just going to middle mouse drag and make it a little bit bigger. So now we can see that there are 2 joints right there. So we can click on this one, be like, oh, we got the hips. We can click on the little one, be like, oh, we got the back. So got that. Boom. Alrighty, so now we're going to work on the neck system, and it's pretty simple for what I'm going to do. This piece of geometry right here, this is going to be my neck. I was originally just going to have the whole thing be the spine and then have the head, but I was like, I'll have a neck just for the sake of having a little bit more control. We're going to build a neck right in here. So, what are we going to do? We've got our rigging, skeleton, create joint. We've got that selected right here. We're going to click, and then we're going to shift click. Then we're going to kind of put it in position, grab this joint, translate X, move it down some, grab this joint, we'll rotate it where it needs to be, grab this joint again, translate X, move it back a little. Okay, so now that is, where that needs to be. Okay, now we're going to grab our new joints and we're going to modify freeze transforms. Now we're going to rename our joints, center, neck, O1, bind, center, neck, O2, waist. And that's the neck. Alrighty, so now we're going to draw the head joint, and that should be pretty dang easy. So let's zoom in here. Our head joint is going to control all of this, but this is going to be like my actual head, and I'm just going to use this as a jaw, this as a jaw. So this circle is the head. So pretty much is what I'm going to roll with. Click right there, and then I don't know, come up here, grab this, we'll just bring it up some, put it pretty close to the neck, and that ended almost where I wanted it to be. Grab our translate and just move it up just a little bit, trying to get that middle area to stop right where the circle does, or at least pretty close. So that is the head joint. So come over here, gonna grab both of these, modify, freeze transforms, boom, transforms are frozen. Look at that. Now we're gonna rename these guys. Center, head, 01, bind, center, head, 02, waist. Okay, so real quick, we're just going to go through all of our joints that we've made so far, which is the spine, the hips, the neck, and the head. And we're just going to make sure that all of them have the correct values on them. Even though we froze them, they're still going to have some values. So the hips can have all three translates, just nothing and rotates and scale. So we're good there. Okay, so then the back, the first one can have X, Y, and Z, and then nothing in rotate and scale. Now, all of the children of the back should only have translate X, and then nothing else. So we're good, 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 good. Hip, we just checked. The neck, the first one can have all three. Cool. Second one should only have X. Head, the first one can have all three, and the second one should only have X. We are awesome there. Okay, so as we did previously, we're just going to go to our side view and start drawing joints. We're going to start working on the leg. I initially drew 5 joints, and I then added a 6th one for the toes, even though I'm going to treat the toes more like I would hands. This is my first time kind of doing actual toes on a character, so I'm still experimenting a little bit. Yeah, I drew 6, and I think that last one's just going to be there to kind of control all the toes, and then I'll have separate controls within the toes. So anyway, I drew 5 down, and then I created the 6th one going just past the toes, and I was sure to keep the one for the ball and the one for the toes themselves pretty close to the ground, just for the RFL system, I think that's what it's called. But yeah, they had to be pretty close to the grid, and you don't want them right in the middle of the geometry. But everything else you want pretty much in the middle. Okay, and then I went to both my front view, my side view, making sure that the joints are within the geometry. Then what I did was I checked my orientation by double-clicking on the Translate tool and going to Axis Orientations and changing it to Object. And then I clicked on each of my joints and made sure that the blue arrow was pointing forward. Now it's going to look a little funky just because the joints turn, but it is facing forward. Pretty sure anyway. I guess we'll find out when we get to the animation. So once we double check that, I went Modify and Freeze Transforms. Then the last step to do was just to name the joints. And this is the left leg, so we're going to call it left, LT underscore leg underscore 01 bind. And then we're going to keep that naming convention going all until the last one, which was LT underscore leg underscore 06 waist, because that is where the toes are going to be controlled, and it's the last one. And that's the leg. Alrighty, so now we're going to work on the arm joints, and the arm joints are pretty dang similar to the leg joints, just in terms of concept and how you make them, but there are a few differences. We're going to do the arm, the clavicle, and the hand right now. So let's do it. We'll start off with the arm itself. And just like the leg, we're going to grab the Create Joint tool, of course, we're rigging. And the arm really only takes 3 joints. You got the shoulder, the elbow, and then the wrist. And then we'll just kind of position them in their way that they go. I will say my problem with this character is I put him together pretty much. I modeled him in a pose rather than an A pose or a T pose or whatever. So his arms are bent. However, that's okay because we will find our way around it. My rigging experience is not very great. However, I think we'll work it out somehow. So anyway, we have the joints in there. Now we're going to move on to the hand. And the hand is pretty simple. It's just two simple joints, and one will be at the wrist, pretty much on top of the waist joint for the arm, and then the second joint, which is the waist for the hand, isn't going to be at the end of the hand, but rather somewhere in the middle. And then I shrunk down the radiuses, whatever you call it, for the joints, just so that I can differentiate a little bit. Then I moved them into place, and that was pretty much the hand. Now on for the clavicle. Now, I don't exactly know dinosaur anatomy, so the clavicle is a bit of a mystery to me. So, I kind of just guesstimated based on where a clavicle would be for like a person, and I'm just gonna roll with that. And the clavicle is gonna let us move our arm without like moving the arm itself. It's in the chest, and it lets us like raise our arm and stuff like that, move our arm and shoulder forward. So that is what the clavicle is going to do, and it's like the hand, it's just two simple points, two simple joints, I should say. From there, we're going to check our orientations, and then we're going to highlight them all. We're going to go modify freeze transforms, and then after that, it's just simple namings. And the arm is going to be, in this case, LT underscore arm underscore 01 underscore bind, and then 02, and then 03 waist. The hand is going to be LT underscore hand underscore 01 underscore bind, and then the next one's a waist, and then the clavicle will be LT underscore clav underscore 01 underscore bind, and then the second one is a waist. And that is the arm joint drawing, pretty much. Okay, so the next step is to mirror our arm joints and leg joints. So let's do it. To mirror, we're going to go up to rigging and skeleton, mirror joints, and we're going to click on the little option box. Now in this option box, we're going to choose the YZ because that should be the middle. Like if you were to look at our character head on, cut them right down the middle, that is the YZ plane. So we're going to mirror them there. Now once we have that selected, we're also going to go to the search for and replace with section. Now we did that fancy naming convention for a reason, to make our lives easier. So when we type in search for LT and replace with RT, it's going to look for like our left clavicle and rename it to be our right clavicle when it mirrors it over. So it just makes everything easy, we don't have to rename. Speaking of the clavicle, let's go ahead and start with that. All we have to do is select our left clavicle, and we're already set up for search and replace. So all we have to do is hit mirror, and boom, we have ourselves a right clavicle. And if you look at the name, it is RT Clav, and it even renamed the waist. So now we're going to do that with the arm, the hand, and I had to move them over just a little bit because my character must not be completely in the center, and then we'll do that with the leg. Okay, so the next step for me was to put in the joints for the tail. I ended up needing 14 of them just because that number of joints works with the number of geometry I made, and this is my first time working with an actual tail. I've only done my T1 so far, and he does not have a tail, so this was fun. It's pretty much the exact same concept to doing the spine, except now it's on a tail. So we're going to be sure to check orientations, freeze transforms, rename things, and we'll be set. So now we're going to rig the hands, and how we're going to do this is we're going to go into the front view and grab our create joint tool, and we're going to draw 4 joints straight out. I'll rotate that down to the finger, and then I'll position the first one right where the finger meets the hand. And of course I'll go into different views and adjust this. But then I'll just put one joint in between each piece of geometry. So one in between the hand and the first piece of the finger, and then so on. And then on the waist one, we're going to put it right at the very end of the claw, but still inside. Okay, so then I'm going to highlight all of them and bend it to make sure that they're all bending correctly. And then once I've got that down, then the other finger is a piece of cake because we're just going to duplicate it and move it over. Position it, and then I'll double check, make sure that's still working just fine. I'll go through the children joints and make sure that there's only translate X values. Once that's done, I will select them all and freeze transforms. And then all that's left to do is to name these. So we're going to call the first one LT underscore index underscore 01 underscore bind, all the way to 04 waist. And then the other one, since I don't have any other fingers, I'm just going to call it a pinky. So it'll be LT underscore pinky underscore 01 underscore bind. And then again all the way to 04 waist. Now that is the hand, but we're going to go ahead and do the right hand while we're at it. So to do that, we're going to go and use the mirror joint tool, which is in the skeleton tab. So like we did with all the other joints, we're going to go to the option box, make sure it's YZ, and search for LT, replace with RT. That's all we're going to do. Highlight our joints and hit apply. Now, like I said a few times already in this video, my character must not be centered in the world perfectly, so I've got to move these joints over and reposition it. So then I'll make sure their orientations are still good, they're bending right, and then we'll do it again with the pinky. Then all that's left is to select the joints and freeze transforms. And now we have the hands rigged. Alrighty, so now that we've done the fingers, we're going to move on to the toes, which are essentially the exact same thing. So what we're going to do is just hop into an orthographic view. I prefer the front one, just because that works with my orientation for some reason. Yours might be a little different. I'm going to get in there, draw out my joints. For my toes, it's going to take 4. One in between the foot and the first part of the toe, then another between the first and second part of the toe, one between the second and claw, and then one at the very end of the claw. So what I want to do is make sure it's in the middle of the toe itself, not necessarily the joint in the middle of each piece of geometry, because I don't want to control the geometry from the center. I want to control it from the part in which it's bending from, if that makes sense. So then next I will just highlight all my joints, grab my rotate tool, and just start bending it around, making sure that it rotates correctly. This is how I like to visualize and see if they're oriented correct. Okay, so now that we have the first toe in place, we're going to simply duplicate the joints and move it to the other 2 left toes. Okay, once those are in place, now we're going to rename our joints. So I'm going to call the first one LT underscore big toe underscore 01 underscore bind, all the way down to an 04 waist. The next one I'll call LT underscore middle toe underscore 01 underscore bind, all the way down to an 04 waist. And then you guessed it, LT underscore pinky toe underscore 01 underscore bind, all the way down to an 04 waist. Next, we're going to mirror our joints, just like what we did with the hands. We're going to go to the skeleton tab and mirror joints option box. Make sure that we are on the YZ. We're going to search for LT and replace with RT. That's why we named the joints before we do this part. And boom, now that we have mirrored it, we're going to readjust it just to make sure it fits right. We'll do that with the other toes. Alrighty, now our main toes are done. Now we have to do the dew claw, which it sounds, oh goodness, it's a dew claw. No, it's going to be pretty much the exact same thing, except this one's going to have 5 joints. We're going to have one right in here, and then one in between each part all the way down to the end down here. Now that we have our joint made, I went through and changed the radius size on these joints just so I can better fit it in the dew claw. It's a pretty small piece of geometry, and I don't need that joint taking up all the space. So then I positioned it, renamed it LT underscore dew claw underscore 01 underscore bind all the way down to an 05 waist, mirrored it over. Now all of our joints are placed. However, we still need to freeze transform. So we're going to highlight them all and freeze our transforms. So now I'm just going to double check and go down our list here. All of our 01 underscore bind joints can only have values in the translate X, Y, and Z. The rotates all have to be 0 and the scales all have to be 1. And then all of our children can only have values in translate X. The other 2 translates have to be 0, the rotates are 0, and the scales are 1. And we now have joints for the toes. Alrighty, so we're almost done with the joints. The next step is to just create the jaw joint. So we're going to go ahead and grab the head joint since that is all we're really going to need. And we're going to duplicate it. Then we're just going to move it down and extend it to the length of the jaw. Rotate it up. Then we'll just modify freeze transforms and rename our joints. We're going to call it CT underscore jaw underscore 01 underscore bind. And then CT underscore jaw underscore 02 underscore waist. Alright, so now that all of our joints are in place, now we need to connect them up, because right now if I were to move the spine joint system, it's not going to move the head, it's not going to move the arms, which it should, and if I were to move the left clavicle, it's not going to move the left arm. So nothing moves together right now. So let's fix that by padding our root joints. Of course, this isn't going to fix it itself, but it's going to start the connection process. So let's do it. Okay, to start off, make sure that you have absolutely nothing selected and hit Command G. This is going to create an empty group. Now with this group, hold down V and move it to one of your root joints, one of your 0-1 binds. In this case, I chose the left clavicle. Alright, so with the group in place, you want to have the group selected and modify freeze transforms. Now we're going to rename our group. In this case, it is going to be LT_clav_00pad. Pretty much whenever you're making these groups, it's going to end in 00pad. So if I were doing the left big toe, it'd be LT_big toe_00_pad. Or if I was doing the head, it would be CT_head_00_pad. So now with our pad in place, it's frozen, it's renamed. We're going to grab the joint system it's gonna control pretty much. So in this case, it's the left clavicle. So I'm gonna grab the left clavicle joint system. In the outliner, middle mouse drag it underneath the pad group. And that is how you create a pad for your root joint. Now we need to do this for all of our joint systems that we created. So the back, the head, the jaw, all of the fingers, all the toes, the arms, the hands, the legs, the tail, the hip, keeping in mind to always move them while holding V so that they snap to the joint. Remember to always freeze your transforms. All of your group names will end in 00pad. And then you just middle mouse drag your joint system underneath your pad in the outliner. But now everything has a pad and we are all good to go on that front. Alrighty, so now that we have all of the pads for our joint systems, now we're going to just hook everything up. This is the part we've been waiting for. Well, at least one of the parts, right? We're pretty much going to tell our pads which joints will influence other joints. So like we're going to tell the neck, hey, when the back moves, you're going to move too. Hey head, when the neck moves, you're going to move as well. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. And how are we going to do that? Well, let's find out. So to start off, you want to go to the rigging menu because we need the parent constraint option. So we're going to go to constrain parent constraint option box, and you want to make sure that maintain offset is checked on. Very important. Otherwise, everything that we've done thus far falls apart. Okay, so this is going to be a little difficult to explain, but I think once you get it, you've got it. So just bear with me, I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. We're going to select the joint that will be the last one to influence the next joint system. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let me show you. So we're going to select the back waist joint because that is the last one to influence the neck. So we're going to select the joint of the back, and then we're going to command select the neck pad, not the neck joint, the neck pad. Then we're going to apply a parent constraint. Whenever any part of the back moves, the neck is going to move as well. We pretty much told the neck to follow the back. Okay, so that wasn't so bad, but then you get into things like the clavicle, when you're like, what do I do here? Because most of the time you're going to connect the waist joint to the next pad, but connecting the waist joint of the back wouldn't necessarily make much sense for the clavicles. So what I did was I hopped into the side orthographic view and I found out which joint would be the last one to affect the clavicle. In my case, it was back joint 04. Any joints beyond that will affect more of the neck area, and they would not deal with the clavicles pretty much. And you can think of it like a driver-driven relationship. What is the last joint that will drive this pad? And then the driven is what's, being controlled. So in this case, back joint 04 is the driver, and the clavicle pad, he's just the passenger. He's going to go wherever the back joint driver says he's going to go. Think of it like that, driver driven. That's very important to understand. However you can understand it, that's the way to think about it. So we're going to grab our back joint 04 in this case and our left clavicle pad and apply a parent constraint. And then we're going to do the same with the right. So now if I grab the back 01 bind and move, we can see the neck move and the clavicles move. I would say the clavicles are the most difficult one to kind of place just because you actually have to think about it and it's not necessarily a waist joint that's going to be driving the clavicle. Other than that, the rest of them are pretty straightforward. So we're just going to hook up the rest of our joints. Going to grab our left clavicle waist, grab our left arm pad, parent constraint, left arm waist to left hand pad, parent constraint, left hand waist to left index pad, parent constraint, left hand waist to left pinky pad, parent constraint. And we're going to do the exact same setup with the right arm. And we're going to go neck waist to head pad, parent constraint, and then head waist to jaw pad, parent constraint. And now if we grab the back, we can see that the entire upper half of our dinosaur moves. So that is all set up. Now we're going to set up the lower part. We only have one hip joint, so we're going to grab that, and then our left pad, our left leg pad, parent constraint. Then we're going to grab the hip joint again, and the right leg pad, parent constraint. Moving on to the toes. Now I have an extra 2 joints on the legs for the RFL system we're going to create. So what I did was I applied the parent constraint for the toes to the leg 04 bind, and then the dew claw to the leg 03 bind, because that is the last joint to have influence on it. Did the same with the right leg, and then back to the hip joint. I selected that, and then the tail pad and parent constraint. Now we can move the entire lower half with just the hips, which is what we want, and the entire upper half with the back 01 bind, which is what we want. Now we are all hooked up. Alrighty, so now that all the joints are working together, they're padded, everything moves the way it should, we're going to get into the fun part of creating controls. And that's not even sarcastic, it's pretty dang fun. So what are we going to do? We're going to start off with the back joints. Now, initially I was just going to make a circle because typically, you know, that's what you do for the spine, but I was like, my character's a bit too thick for circles, and he's got his little arms and it would all just kind of get in the way. So I was like, what if I do like a bit of a old school kind of key in the back, like a wind-up toy, you know? That's what I was thinking of. The controls can literally just stick out of his spine. So what I did was I went to the Create tab up top, and then Curve Tools and CV Curve Tool. With the tool selected, I made sure I was in curve degree 1 linear. And then if I just hold X, I can trace whatever shape I want on the grid, which is pretty cool. So I went with this T shape, and then I centered the pivot, and I was like, it's going to be sticking out of his back, so the pivot needs to be at the bottom of the key shape. So I hit D and moved the pivot to the bottom of the shape. And then I hid my polygons, and while holding down V, I moved it up to the back bind 01 and rotated it up. Brought back my polygon to make sure it was visible, and I was like, hey, that works pretty good. So from there, hid my polygons again, and I just duplicated that and gave each back joint its own fancy T key control. Then I duplicated that and made one for the neck. However, I turned the neck one upside down and shrunk it down a little bit. That way it's like, hello, I'm the neck, and you don't, confuse it with the spine. And yeah, there we go. We had the back controls and the neck control. From there, I knew I was going to start doing some more 3D controls, like cubes and stuff. So how do you make one of those? Because that's not just a default option. What I did was I went to the modeling toolbar, and I created a cube, just a basic polygon cube. And then using the curve tool from earlier, I held down V and traced the vertices on the cube. When I had fully traced all the edges, I hit enter and deleted the cube, and I was left with my cube control. Now I'm going to keep that aside as like a little tool palette and just duplicate it whenever I want a new cube. That way I don't have to make another one. So I duplicated it and scaled it up, and this one's going to be for the hips. So I put the pivot on the hips, and I quickly got overwhelmed with all the cube and straight edges of things. So what I did was I went back and redid my back controls and my neck control, and I made them just circles with one CV pulled out, so it looks like a little map marker. But now that they're circular, I can like easily tell, hey, that's the spine and that straight edge belongs to the hips. So moving back to the hips, I kind of made them look like a pair of very geometric underwear, pretty much, because it's going to go on its hips. It's, the dinosaur's underwear, but you can make it whatever shape you want. Now moving on to the head, I went back to the cube and duplicated another one, brought it up to the head, resized it for the T-Rex's top part of his head, moved my pivot onto the head 01 bind joint. At this point I went ahead and highlighted all of my joint pad groups, and I just hit Command G to group them all together. I called that my joint group. Then I highlighted all of my curves that I've created so far, and I froze transforms and went edit delete by type history. Okay, so now it's time to rename all of our controls, and our controls are going to end with underscore icon. So like how our joints ended with bind or waist, these are going to end in icon. So my head is going to be CT underscore head underscore icon. My neck is CT underscore neck underscore icon. My hips will be CT underscore hips underscore icon. And all of the back joints will be CT underscore back underscore 01 underscore icon, all the way to, in my case, 06 icon. And now we have our controls. So now that we have our controls, the next step is to connect the controls. Because you see, if I grab one of the back joints and rotate it, nothing happens. No other controls move or anything. No joints move, nothing. It's just there. It's a decoration. So we're going to connect some stuff. Okay, so step one is to basically set up our hierarchy and tell the controls which other controls they're going to listen to. So we're going to tell the head control, hey, you're going to move when the neck control does. And to do this, we just need to go into the outliner, select the head icon, middle mouse drag it onto the neck icon. Now when we move the neck control, the head control moves. So they are hooked up. And then we pretty much just need to walk down our back system doing this. The neck will go to the back 06, back 06 will go to back 05, back 05 to back 04, and all the way down to back 01. Now we're not going to hook up the back 01 to the hips because the back 01 and up is a completely different system from the hips down. So once we set up that hierarchy in the outliner and we can move it around and we can see that all of the controls work together. Awesome. We can even shift left mouse button, the little plus next to back 01, and that'll open up the entire hierarchy and we can double check, make sure everything's in the right order. So now we're going to set up the controls to actually control the joints. Let's do it. So we need to be in the animation menu and we're going to go to constraint, parent constraint option box. Now in the option box we want to make sure maintain offset is checked on. That way again nothing snaps together and destroys what we have. And much like what we've done before while rigging our character, we need to select the driver and driven in order to make this constraint. So our driver is actually going to be our control and our driven is going to be the joint. The control is going to tell the joint where to go. And since the control has clean values, it's going to be very animation friendly, and the joint does not have clean values. So we want to get that connected to the control. So let's do it. So we're going to select the control, which is the driver, the joint, which is the driven, and then simply hit apply. Again, making sure maintain offset is checked on. Now if we grab our back 01 control, we can rotate that and we see the entire system move. Not because we've hooked up the other back joints to the other back controls, it's because all of those joints are connected to back 01 joint, and back 01 joint is being controlled by our icon, our control. So everything moves with that joint. So now we're going to go through the rest of the back, the neck, and the head, and we're going to select the control, select the joint it's going to influence, and hit apply, thus creating the constraints for animation pretty much. Now we can test it out and see how everything's moving. It's looking great. We're going to come over here and grab the hip control and then the hip joint and do the same thing. We're going to hit apply and we can see that moves the entire lower half now. And now those controls are hooked up. They're connected. Alright, so as said previously, the upper system and the lower system are different. They don't really work together. We can move the back and we can move the hips, and they don't affect each other. And now we're going to create a control that will move both, the upper and the lower. And that is the cog, the center of gravity. We're simply going to go to create nerves primitives, and I'm going to go ahead and choose a circle. You can make your cog whatever shape you would like. I'm going to scale it up, bring it around his lower hips area, and then I'm going to kind of change the shape a little bit so it's a little more accessible. My character, as stated before, is really thick, kind of big, and a little clunky, so I'm just trying to come up with something that I can distinguish from the hips while also, it's not sticking out 3 feet or anything like that. I've got this little Pringle shape for his cog. Then I want to hide my geometry. So I like where the control is, but I don't have my pivot in the right place. So I hit D on the keyboard, held down V, and it moved my pivot up to the joint with the hip and the back. Alrighty, now with that where it is, I'm going to bring back my polygons, rename our control. So we're going to call it CT_COG_icon. Alrighty, so now to connect the back to the cog and have the cog have influence on the back, all we're going to do is pretty much what we did with the back in the last segment. We're going to take the back 01 icon and middle mouse drag it onto the cog icon. Now this will give the cog influence over the entire back. And we want to make sure that we freeze transforms on the cog. Like the back, we're going to grab the hips in the outliner and just middle mouse drag them onto the cog. Now we can rotate the cog and everything rotates. And now we have our cog. Alrighty, so thus far we've done a pretty good job at keeping our outliner clean, but we're going to do just a little bit of organization, not much. Our controls are pretty well all stacked together so far, but we're still going to grab our cog icon, which still has everything else under it, and just hit Command G, and we're going to just call this group our control group. Now I'm going to ignore my cube icon that I created just to duplicate, but I'm going to grab my control group, my joint group, and my geo group. And I'm going to group all those together to create one node for everything for my dinosaur. And I'm just going to call this my T-Rex world, because it's the world node. And this will not be animated, it's just to hold everything. Alrighty, so now we're at the fun part where we're going to test the bind to the character. So let's friggin' do it. We're going to see some results here. So all we have to do is go up to the top right and look for this little icon here. Click it and make sure it says select by name. Then we're going to go into the little search bar and type *_bind. And this is why we named everything the way we did. That way this will select all of our bind joints. None of our waste or anything like that. Okay, and then we're going to go down and select all of our geometry. Now if you're doing this with just a normal little character, you probably just have one piece of geometry and that's the skin. But me, I've got all of this junk. So then we're going to go to our rigging menu. We're going to go to Skin, Bind Skin Option Box. Now it's important when we look at the Bind To drop down that we select the selected joints, because if we do joint hierarchy, it's going to include the bind joints and the waist joints. That's no good. So selected joints, and you want maintain max influences off. And then in terms of the bind method, I'm going to go with closest distance. I normally would go with heat map, but heat map won't work with a character like this where it's not all one piece and there are no holes. Since I have so many pieces and they're not connected, heat map would and did crash my system. So I'm going to go with closest distance. And then I'm going to go bind skin. And there we go. Now we can, play around. The skin isn't looking very nice. It's very wobbly. The weights are way off, but we have some movement finally. So that's exciting. Alrighty, so now that we have some basic binding and some joints and controls and such, now we're going to work on some IK systems. Specifically right now, we're going to work on the IK systems for the clavicles and arms. So let's do it. Super friggin' easy. Okay, so you want to be in the rigging menu, go to skeleton, create IK handle option box. Since we're doing the left clavicle right now, we want to make sure that we have the single chain solver, and that's just because we're only dealing with two joints. So we're going to click on our first joint, shift select our waist joint, and then boom, there's your IK. Okay, now we're going to do it with the left arm. Now with the arm, since we have an elbow, we need to tell the IK system where it's going to bend. Now my arm is probably bent enough so that it should know. However, just to be safe, we're going to go ahead and set a preference, pretty much, to let it know, hey, this is the way you're going to bend. So we have our joint. We're going to go ahead and rotate it in the way it's going to rotate. Then we're going to hold down the right mouse button and set preferred angle. And boom, it's been set. And you can double check that by going to the attribute editor, and you can see where it says preferred angle. I happen to rotate in Y, so that's why my angle is there. But real quick, do not hit undo to get your joint back to where it needs to be. You have to zero that out. If you hit undo, it's going to unset your preferred angle. Alrighty, so before we create the IK system, we're going to change single chain solver to rotate plane solver. This is the one where you have an elbow or a knee. And sometimes when joints are on top of joints, it's just easier to find your joint in the outliner, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So I've got my create IK handle tool loaded up. So I'm going to select my first joint and my last joint, and there's the IK system. We're going to go ahead and rename these. The one that we made for the clavicle is going to be called LT underscore shoulder underscore IK, and the one we just made for the arm is going to be LT underscore arm underscore IK. And then we just do the exact same thing to the right side. And now we have our arm IK systems. Alrighty, now that we have our IK systems in for our arms, we need to make some controls. That way we can use them. So let's do it. First thing we're going to do is make a shoulder control icon. We need to go to Create, NURBS Primitives, and I'm going to go with a circle. And then I'm going to turn that circle into kind of like a bean shape. It's just something that fits nicely over a shoulder, in my opinion. So now that I have it, I'm going to duplicate it, bring it up, and position it right over the shoulder area. I'm going to freeze transforms. I'm going to rename it LT underscore shoulder underscore icon. And that's the shoulder icon. We're going to hook it up later. But now I'm going to grab that cube I made a while back and duplicate it. I'm going to bring the duplicate over to the hand. And I'm going to snap the pivot to the bind joint of the wrist. Then I'll freeze transforms. And I'm going to call this LT underscore hand underscore icon. Okay, so now with both of these controls here, we need to hook it up. And we're going to parent the IK system to the control. We've been talking about parenting and parent constrained. We're just doing parenting right now. For parenting, we select the children and then the parent. So let's do it. So we're going to grab the child, which is the shoulder IK, and then the parent, which is the shoulder icon, and then hit P. And now it's parented. And then we're going to do the same for the hand. We're going to grab the arm IK and the hand icon and hit P. Now we can see if we translate the shoulder, the weight painting is not done, but we can control the shoulder. And then we can also do that with the hand. We can translate it. Alrighty, we're almost done. Now we need to create an elbow control. So again, I'm going to grab a circle. I'm kind of going to make what I did for the back. It looks like a bit of a pointer in a sense. I'm going to scale it down, duplicate it, and bring it over to the elbow. So I'm going to hide my polygons and snap it directly to the elbow. But since it's going to be pointing at the elbow, I'm going to move it back and then kind of rotate it and rescale it so it's not sticking inside the dinosaur stomach. So then I will freeze transforms, delete history, center pivot. Now we're going to rename it LT underscore elbow underscore icon. Now we parented the shoulder and hand icons to the IK system, but this one, the elbow, is going to be a pull vector. It's going to be a constraint. So I'm going to grab my driver, which is my icon, and then my driven, which is the IK system. Then I'm going to go constrain, pull vector, and there it is. Bring back my polygons. Again, there's no weight painting done yet, but everything moves as it should. Now we just need to do it to the right side, and we have our controls. Alrighty, so now we're going to do a little bit of IK arm cleanup, and there's really only one thing to do, if we're being honest. And that is to grab both of our shoulder icons, which are little bean shapes, and then grab our uppermost back control. And then all we have to do is hit P. And that just made the shoulders follow the uppermost back. The next step is to create our hand icons. Now, we kind of already made hand icons. We're gonna make finger control icons, but they're gonna just be called hand icons because they can also control the hand. It's gonna control a lot of things. It's like a multi-tool, like a multi-control. Okay, so step one, you want to create whatever kind of control you want to use. I'm going to go with the circle, so I'm going to go create NURBS primitives circle. Now right away we're going to hit Command G and group it. Then we're going to select the hand joint and then command select the group we just made. So constrain, parent constrain, maintain offset off, apply. This is just going to snap it up to that joint. Then we're going to delete our constraint. That was just for moving purposes. Now we can grab the control and place it above the hand where we want it. We can scale it, grab the CVs, make a cool shape. I made like a little finger shape because that's what this is, going to do. But then on the icon we just made, not the group, but the icon, we want to freeze transforms and delete by type history. Next we're going to grab the pivot point of the icon and move it to the hand joint. From there we're going to rename the group LT underscore hand underscore local, and then the icon LT underscore hand underscore icon. We're going to do the same with the right side, and then we just need to hook up the hand icons to the joint. So we're going to grab the driver, which is the control, the driven, which is the joint, and then maintain offset on and apply. Now we can turn our hands and such with our new controls. And to wrap up this section, we're going to parent the hand icons to the waist joint of the arm so that when we move the cube around the wrist, our new hand icons will move with it. A lot of words there, but let's do it. So to do that, we're going to grab the waist joint in our arm. We're going to start with the left one. So LT underscore arm underscore 03 underscore waist. We're going to grab that. And then we're going to command select the local group of our new control. So LT underscore hand underscore local. With both those selected, we want to make sure the parent constraint options box is open, the maintain offset option is checked, and then we can hit apply. And this will allow us to move the box and have the new control follow it. So we can get this kind of like cat scratching motion. And that's how we set up the hand icons and local stuff. Alrighty, so now we're going to make sure that our hands don't rotate when we move our wrist cube control. I'm only going to set up the hands to rotate when we rotate the hand icon, not necessarily the wrist icon. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to start with the right hand. And I'm going to grab my RT underscore hand underscore local group. And then I'm going to duplicate that 2 times. Then I'm going to delete the parent constraint because that'll just cause an issue later on. Then we're going to delete the controls underneath the 2 new groups. Rename one of the groups to RT underscore hand underscore world. And rename the other one to RT underscore arm underscore local. Now we're going to go into our joint hierarchy. We're going to find our RT underscore arm underscore 03 underscore waist. And we're going to use the middle mouse button to move the RT underscore arm underscore local group on top of the 03 waist. That way the local group should be underneath the waist joint. From there we're going to grab our local group, then our hand local group. We're going to go constrain, point constraint, and apply. Alright, so now we're going to grab the arm local group, the hand world group, and the hand local group in that order. Then we're going to go constrain, orient constraint, to make sure that they're all lined up correctly. Then we're going to go into our hand local group, click on the orient constraint, and then over in the right, we're going to change interpret type to shortest, and then I like to work in world, so I'm just going to turn local off by making that a 0. And now we can move our arm without rotating the hand at all. And then our hand icon is the only thing that can translate the hand if we wanted it to, and rotate it. And then we'll just repeat all those steps for the left side. Believe it or not, we are now almost done with the arms. For this part, we're going to focus our attention on the fingers and yeah, just create an easy way to manipulate them. So let's do it. We're going to do that by creating custom attributes within the channel box. And right now, let's show you how to do that. So we're going to select the control that will have these attributes on them. And in my case, it's going to be this finger hand looking one that we made a while back. With that selected, I'm going to go to the channel box and go to Edit and then Add Attribute. Now we get this screen. Now here we want to add our long name, choose our data type, and then do a few other settings, but those are the main features. So let's do it. We're going to start by creating a separator. So we're going to call this our curl section. So we're going to write curl in the long name. Now this will not be something that we edit. It's just to separate it for organization. So we're going to go to enum for our data type, and then for the enum names we're going to highlight blue and simply delete its name in the bottom, and that'll get rid of it. And then green, we're going to just hit the dash a few times. I like 7, it works for me, 7 dashes. But then you'll see in the right, we get a curl with 7 dashes. We're just going to keep doing that for different attributes you want. So the next one we want is index, because this is our section that will have the index curl. For this one, we're going to do the same, enum, get rid of blue, change green to some dashes, and boom, there it is. Okay, now we're going to choose a different data type, because this is where an actual control is going to happen. So in our long name, we're going to put base, and then I put capital I so that I know base index. But then our data type is going to be float, because this is a number, that can float between a minimum and a maximum, which brings me to the next part, our min and max. I always just go with -10 and 10. It works. Different riggers have different preferences. So we'll hit add, and there it is, base I, and its default is 0. So then I do that for the middle of the index, mid I, -10, 10. and the end of the index, float -10, 10. And there are my controls for the index curl. Now we're going to do the same thing for pinky. We're going to put pinky in the long name, enum, delete blue, and put some dashes where green is, hit add. And there's our separator. Now we're going to put base P for base pinky, float -10, 10, add, middle P, NP. Now I'm going to create a section for spread. This is just where the fingers go side to side rather than curling. So spread, enum, delete blue, dashes where green is, and then I'm going to put index because this is just going to spread the entire index finger. We're going to go back to float, -10 and 10, add, and then one for the pinky, -10, 10, add. And now we have our custom attributes for the left hand. We need to do it for the right hand as well. Alrighty, so now that we have our attributes made, first of all, we're going to just highlight our separators. We're going to hold down the right mouse button and we're going to lock selected. Pretty much what that does is it better indicates that there is a separator, and I mean these aren't going to do anything anyway, so why have them unlocked? As you can see, I could highlight these and drag them with the middle mouse button and they all work, -10 to 10 just like we set up, but nothing is happening. So we need to connect our joints to the controls. So how do we do it? Well, we have to select our control, and then with something selected down here, we go to edit and then set driven key. Now let me show you what happens if you don't have something selected. Select the control. If there's nothing selected, we cannot do the set driven key. You have to have something down here selected. It doesn't matter what it is. Set driven key, then this screen pops up. Like we were talking about earlier, we have to think driver driven. We have driver, we have driven. What's driving the action? What's being driven? So our controller right here, that is our driver. That's what we're going to select to manipulate the fingers. That's the driver. So, okay, we selected it. We're going to hit load driver. Boom. And now, what is being driven? Well, we're going to start off with our base index right here. And our base index is the first one right here. Okay, so we have our driven selected. We're going to hit load driven. Boom, there it is. This is our driver, the control. This is our driven, the joint. Now we have to select what attribute of the driver is driving the attribute of the driven. That makes sense? So I'm going to hit E on the keyboard. We're going to get the rotate tool. I can see with the rotate tool that if I rotate Y, that is bending in the direction I want it to, right? So I know that rotate Y is the attribute I need to drive. For the joint being driven, we're going to hit rotate Y. That's what we're going to control. And then the control icon, the little control over here we're going to use is base I. So we're going to hit our base I. We have our driver attribute, we have our driven, and our driven attribute. And we are currently set to 0, which this is the position that we want to call 0. It's just the default right in the middle. We're going to hit key. Nothing happens still when we drag this. However, when we are on 0, it knows that it should be in this position. So now we're just going to crank this up to 10, and then we're going to crank our joint, rotate Y, to a position that we would consider 10. And sometimes it's better to push the joint more than you know you're ever going to use it, because you'd rather have more there than not having enough in terms of how far you're able to bend it. I would consider that a 10 in terms of building. I'm never going to push the joint past probably here. So right here is just fine. I've manipulated my joint. I've changed my base I to 10. We're going to hit key. Now when we go back to our control, we see that we're on 10, but once I highlight this and middle mouse drag it down to 0, it should move back to its place. And there we go. Boom. Now we're going to push it all the way to -10, highlight our joint again, come over here, and we're going to crank it all the way up, like further than we know we'll ever use. Still only using rotate Y because that is the only attribute we are manipulating. We're going to hit key, and now we can move this thing around all the live long day, and that is our base of the index finger. Now we're going to do the same thing for the middle and end of the index and base, middle, and end of the pinky. We've done that for all of the other curls, and now we can highlight them all and just go whoop. Of course our weight painting is still, we haven't done that. But we can see our fingers are curling awesome like. So that is exactly what we wanted. Now we want them to move side to side like a spread in case we ever want to drag the hand and have the fingers do a little bit of overlapping. Let's do that. It's pretty much the exact same concept. Here we have our control selected, that's our driver. We're going to do our index because that is our spread. This is our index. We're going to grab the joint, hit load driven. Now we can see that the spread will be rotate Z. We'll hit rotate Z to be our driven. Hit key, go back to our control, index, crank it up to 10. So then we have to establish which way is 10. We'll go ahead and say that this way is 10. So we'll go further than we will ever use, and hit key again, grab our control, bring it back, and we can see that it works. So let's go the other way now, -10, grab our control, go backwards, more than we would ever use, key it, boom, now we can spread, and we can curl at the exact same time. So we've got our spread going, got a curl going, and everything's awesome. Just repeat for the pinky, and then make sure we do everything that we just did, the curls and the spread, for the right hand. Alrighty, so now we're going to go ahead and make the controls for the tail. We're going to go ahead and approach it kind of like we did with the back. It's pretty much the exact same system, but a lot more joints, and it's a tail. So I'm going to go create, nerves, circle. I think circles will be just fine here. My only issue may be within the first joint, but we're going to go ahead and address that right now. So hide the polygons. Hit V to move and snap it up. Go ahead and rotate it. Want to move it out. We'll hit D. We will snap our pivot to the joint itself. That way, when we rotate, it rotates like that. Because if we were to have our control right over that, that's just too much going on there. So I think right here will be just fine. Grab ourselves another circle. Alrighty, now we're just going to keep putting these where there are joints. Now that's taking up a lot of space, and I know my tail tapers, so we're going to select these guys, shrink them down, and we'll just keep going until we are happy with the size in all of them. That'll work. We're gonna highlight them all. We're not gonna center pivots because that would mess this one up, and all these pivots are already centered, so that's fine, but we are gonna freeze transforms, and we're gonna edit delete by type history. Okay, so now we're going to rename the tail icons to be CT_tail_01_icon all the way down to CT_tail_13_icon. Alrighty, so the next step, just like with the back, now we're like at a point where we can rotate these all we want, but nothing's going to happen. So we need to tell tail 13 icon to move when tail 12 icon moves, and all the way down. Tail 13 icon, middle mouse on top of 12. 12 on top of 11, 11 on top of 10, all the way down to 1. Okay, now all those are moving together, which is awesome. Grab any joint in here and it'll affect the joints that follow. But since the hips control the bottom and the tail is part of the bottom, we want the tail controls to move when the hip moves. So we're going to grab our tail controls and middle mouse drag them on top of the hip. That way the hip has the tail underneath it. Now when we move the hip controls, the tail controls follow. Okay, then again like the back, we need to get these controls to control the joints. Okay, so we want to be in the animation menu. We're going to go to constrain, parent constraint option, make sure maintain offset is checked on. Controller, grab our joint, apply, and we should be set. There we go. Controls the joint and the rest of the system. So now we'll just do that to the rest of them. Now we should be able to select these and then get a nice curl. Look at that. Woohoo! That bends properly. Try the side bend. Oh yeah. There you go. Look at that. Alrighty, so now we're going to set up the feet. And I'm not gonna lie, this was a doozy. I've never set up a character that has a joint system set up like this. Maybe I set it up different than most people do. I'm not quite sure, but it took a while to figure out. But we eventually did get it, and I think it's it's all right for what it is. Okay, so we're gonna start off by creating a single chain solver between the first leg joint and the second leg joint. And then we're going to change it to a rotate plane solver for the second and fourth joints, leaving the third one as kind of like the back knee in a sense. Then we're going to do a single chain for the 4th and 5th, and then a single chain for the 5th and 6th joints. Alrighty, so the first IK we made, we're going to call LT underscore upper underscore IK. The second one we're going to call LT underscore ankle underscore IK. Third is LT underscore ball underscore IK, and then we have LT underscore toe underscore IK. And that's how we're going to set up the IKs. Okay, now we're going to move on to our RFL system, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to start by drawing some joints. We're going to put a joint in the back of the foot where the heel is going to meet the ground if he rolls back on his heel. From there, we're going to hold down V and create a new joint on top of our toe, connecting the heel to the toe. Then we're going to hold down V and connect one to the ball, and then one to the ankle, so that we have something like this. Now we're going to rename our joints: LT heel RFL, toe RFL, ball RFL, and ankle RFL. Now we need to create our inner and outer banks so the foot can roll up on its side. So back to our create joint tool, we're going to create a joint right on the side of the foot. Like I said, pretty much where if the foot is to roll up on its side, that's where the foot's going to meet the ground. Once that joint is in place, we're going to duplicate it and move it to the other side. We're going to call the first one the inner bank RFL and the second one the outer bank RFL. Then we're going to take the outer bank RFL and middle mouse it on top of the inner bank. And we're going to take the inner bank and middle mouse it on top of the heel. That'll give us a setup like this. Then we're going to take the toe RFL and middle mouse it on top of the outer bank. That way our hierarchy goes heel, inner, outer, toe, ball, ankle. Then we end up with this little zigzaggy. Alrighty, now we're going to take our IKs that we made earlier and middle mouse drag them on top of their corresponding joints. So we're going to middle mouse drag the LT underscore ankle underscore IK on top of the LT underscore ankle underscore RFL, the ball IK to the ball RFL, and the toe IK to the toe RFL. Alrighty, now we're going to take our RFL system and mirror it to the other side because we can't just duplicate it and slide it over. So we're going to select our LT underscore heel underscore RFL to get the whole system. We're going to go skeleton mirror joints, and then that'll pop that over. Now it's not going to be perfect, so we need to go through and select the joints and re-snap them to the correct places on the right side. So we need to go to our toe and hold down V, snap it to the toe joint. We need to go to the ball, snap that, as well as the ankle. Once those are all snapped up, we have our RFL system on the right side. Then we're going to take the IKs that were mirrored over with the RFL and simply delete those. We don't need them, they're not going to work. Then we'll take our right IKs and move them to their corresponding things, like the ankle IK to the ankle RFL, ball to ball, and toe to toe. Okay, the next step is to simply create some controls. So we're going to take that box we made earlier and we're just going to scale it up so it fits around the foot, duplicate it over, that way we have identical controls. Then we need to move their pivots onto the ankle. We're going to rename them LT underscore foot underscore icon, and same for the right foot. Then I'm going to grab that circular pointer guy and move that to the joint within the leg itself. So I'm going to put 2 in the front and 2 in the back. I move them by holding V while I move them to snap them to the joint, and then I simply just translate them away from the joint. I'm going to call the front 2 knee front icons and my back 2 my knee back icons. Okay, now I'm going to create a new control, this little diamond looking thing. I'm going to snap it to the heel of the left foot, translate it away, rotate it up, scale it down, snap the pivot to the heel. Then I'm going to duplicate that same icon, move it over to the toe and snap it. I'm going to duplicate it again and snap it to the ball. We're going to raise it up a little bit and move the pivot down on top of the ball. And then I'm going to grab my little circular pointer guys again, and I'm going to put 1 on each inner and outer bank. These are our controls for the RFL system. It's going to be one way we can control it. I'm also going to create a different way. Put all the controls on the right side as well. Okay, now we need to go through and name them. So the ones on our heels are going to be LT underscore heel underscore icon. And then we're going to have LT underscore toe underscore icon. And then LT underscore ball underscore icon, LT underscore outer bank underscore icon, LT underscore inner bank underscore icon, and then the same for the right side. Now we're just going to grab everything from our foot icon all the way down to our new RFL system icons. We're going to freeze transforms and delete by type history. We are not going to center pivots, that would destroy everything we just made pretty much. And now we're going to create our icon hierarchy down here with the feet. So we're going to grab our heel icon, middle mouse it on top of the foot icon, and then we'll go inner bank on top of heel, outer bank on top of inner, Go toe on top of outer and ball on top of toe. Then we'll do the same setup for the right side. Now we're going to parent constrain our new controls to the joints. Parent constrain, make sure maintain offset is on. We're going to grab the driver control, the driven joint, and hit apply. We'll go through our whole RFL system that way, grabbing the inner joint, hitting apply. As I'm selecting these, my naming convention has worked so well that I can see if I grab the ball icon, I'm also grabbing the ball RFL. Okay, now it's all hooked up. We can translate the foot. Everything comes with it. Now we're going to hook up our knees. So the first two joints we made a single chain solver, and that's because having so many joints here, I don't know of the way to get it to work with two IKs overlapping each other that are rotate plane. We have our first knee, which is just going to be a translate tool pretty much, and it's going to translate our first joint. So for this to work, we need to select child, then parent. So we're going to get the IK and then the control and hit P. Now we can, move that first knee all around. Okay, now we're going to set up the back knee. To do this, we're going to select the control first and then the IK on the ankle, constraint, and pull vector. And that's going to act like pretty much a normal knee that you would find on most rigs. Do the same to the right side, and then we have ourselves a pretty nice leg system. Alrighty, so now to create a mouth control. Just going to grab this guy that we used for the shoulders, we're going to duplicate him, slide him over, bring him up, rotate it to look a bit like that. Freeze transforms, edit, delete by type, history. Now like we've done a million times this far, we're going to hit D, hold V, and move the pivot up to the jaw. Now it rotates like that. We're going to rename this to be center jaw icon. Alrighty, so now we're going to just parent this to it, well, parent constrain, I should say. Driver, driven, maintain offset on, apply, of course, weight painting. Alrighty, now we're just going to parent the jaw to the head, so middle mouse drag the jaw right up to the head icon, boom. Now that should all move together, just like such. You get it upside down. Okay, we're going to shift our attention back down to the feet real quick. And I'm going to do what we did with the fingers, where we created set-driven keys over here. So, with the fingers we have all of this. And we're pretty much going to do the same thing with the toes. Except we'll have about twice as many, because we have 4 toes here. Like 4 claws, we got the dew claw here. And up here we only had 2 fingers, so we will have more. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Edit, add attribute. Alright, so we're going to go curl, enum, get rid of blue, dashes, add, there's a curl. We're going to go big toe, enum, no blue, dashes, base, big toe, float, -10, 10, add, mid, big toe, -10, 10, add, end, big toe, -10, 10, add. We'll go ahead and do this for the other toes. Alrighty, now that we have all of our curls done for our big toe, middle toe, pinky, and dew claw, now we're going to do our spread. Spread, enum, delete blue, green, add some dashes, big, float, -10, 10. Do this for the other toes. So now that we have all of these made, we're going to go ahead and lock all of our separators. So just command select them and lock selected. Now we need to hook everything up. So let's do it. Grab something in here, set driven key. Okay, have our driver, which is our control. Load driver, boom. We're going to start with the base B, base big toes, this one. Select the joint, load the driven. We can see that we're going to be manipulating rotate Z. Now we're over here, we're set to 0, we're going to key it, crank that up to 10, crank this up to what we would consider to be a 10, key it, come back to 0, now we're going to -10, key it, and now we can do that with our toe. Now we're going to do that with all of our toes and dew claw on both sides. Alright, we've gone through and successfully done all that. Now I can highlight them all and it's all going to move and be funky like, oh, look at that. It's creepy as frick, but it's working. Once we do the weight painting, everything will look so much better. Alrighty, so I came across an issue where I saw that my ball control was moving my toes down, and like everything else was working, but I want to keep my toes in place, so I'm just moving the ball of my foot. So I, fiddled around with it for a little bit, and I came up with the solution to get it to only move the foot part and not the toes, and also still move the toes, and all of our controls over here still work. So how did I do it? Let's find out. Pretty much what I did was I chose the wrong joint for influence at the very beginning. So in the beginning I chose this joint to influence the toe pads, where I should have just chosen this joint to influence the pads. So how do you fix it? You gotta come over here into your outliner and find all of the pads. So that's the pinky pad, middle pad, and big toe pad. Command select all of those constraints and delete them. Boom, they're gone. Now we're going to reconstrain them, but to a different joint. So constrain, parent constraint option box, offsets checked on. We're going to select this joint here and then command select the pad, and that is that's what's going to get it to work. So do it again, joint, pad, boom, apply, and now we should be set for just that part of the foot to move. The toe control still works, all of these controls still function properly, and all of these work. So awesome. Alrighty, so now we're going to go ahead and continue on with the feet, and this should be one of the last things we have to do. So we have all these set driven keys, and we're going to create a few more, but not for the toes exactly. We're going to create them for our RFL system. We're going to go ahead and create them for the RFL system we made because some people like to have these controls in here, and I figured, I'd show you just in case. But I like to have my controls off to the side, that way there's minimal right here. And pretty much all that's going to be around the foot is this box, and it will have all of my feet controls within it. So that's what I like to do, so I'll show you that just in case that is something you want to do. So we're going to create some more attributes. We're going to make a separator, so I'll call it RFL, just an enum. Get rid of blue. Okay, so there's our RFL separator. Now we have to look at it and what do we need controls for. So we've got the heel back here. So we're going to go heel, float, -10, 10, add. And then I'm going to go ahead and combine our banks because we're not going to inner bank down. I mean, that would just be outer bank up. So I'm just going to call it bank. It's a float, -10, 10, add. Then we have our toe, -10, 10, add. Then we have the ball, -10, 10, add. Now we've got our RFL system. So we're going to go ahead and lock the RFL channel. Lock it. Okay, now we're going to hook it up. Grab something, edit, set driven key. We've got our driver, which is our foot control. We go down here. Go to heel and grab our heel control. So heel control, load driven, and what are we going to be manipulating? We're going to be manipulating, it looks like rotate X. Okay, so rotate X, key it, increase that to 10. So what will our heel 10 look like? Probably that, and that's way more than I'll ever need. Crank it back down. Okay, now we're going to bank. Okay, so we have our driver, foot, and we're going to be working on the bank now. Now we need to select our driven, so we're going to select both our inner and outer banks. Now they're both here. And let's double check what we're manipulating. For the inner it looks like rotate Z, and for the outer it looks like rotate Z as well. We can just hit rotate Z and key it. That is what our 0 bank is going to look like. Now we're going to bank all the way to 10. We're just going to manipulate this one, our inner, key it, come back, bring bank back down. Now we're going to go down to -10. Now we're going to increase the outer bank, key that, and now we should be able to just kind of bounce back and forth. Now the toe and the ball should just be the exact same setup as like the heel. So go and do that, and then we'll do it with the other foot. Now if you want to put your RFL system down here, like me, you're probably going to want to hide these controls. So we're just going to find them in our outliner, our heel, inner, toe, ball, all these guys, and control H. Now they are not visible. do that to this side, and I like that. Some people don't, but I do. We are almost there. We are in the home stretch. Now it's time to make our master control. So this is going to be end all be all of controls. It's going to be the main guy walking around. So it's going to control everything. Typically what people do is they will just create a circle and make it real big, but I'm going to try to have a little fun with it anyway. Bring it over here, and I'm going to see if I can't make some sort of cool dinosaur foot or something. You know what, that's fine. It's 2 toes, but it'll work. So I'm going to call this T-Rex control. Just the overall T-Rex control. It moves the whole thing. Before we do anything else to the T-Rex control, we want to freeze transform, center pivot, and delete history. Very important. Now what we're going to do from here is grab our cog, grab the T-Rex control, and hit P, and then we're going to go around and collect other things that aren't moving yet. So we're going to grab the feet, grab the control, hit P, then we'll grab the wrist controls, grab the T-Rex control, hit P, and the elbows, the knees, we want to make sure we get all those too. And pretty much we're just going around and we're going to keep parenting things to the master control until everything follows it. And now that we've done all that, we have ourselves a dinosaur with all moving controls and everything. It's friggin' awesome. It's awesome. Alrighty, so now we're going to move on to the part that's going to be easiest for me, but difficult if you made a model that's all one piece, pretty much. And that is the weight painting. I'm not a big fan of weight painting, but that's why I model this way, so I don't really have to. So let me show you what we're going to do. I've got all this geo right here, and pretty much I just need to go into my skin, paint skin weights, need to bring back my joints, and how it's going to work is pretty much each joint will have its own piece of geometry. Very little of them, to any really, will be sharing. So let's do it. Let's start off with our hip geometry. So we're going to get our hip geo, grab our center hip bind, and I'm just going to make sure my value is 1 and hit flood. And that will give the hips total control over that big piece of geometry. So when it comes down to weight painting, pretty much what I'll do is walk down my geometry list. So on my left pinky toe, so that's this one, and then I know that that is my pinky toe bind 3. Fill it. Awesome. That's my left leg 2. And I know that's going to be my left leg 2, flood it. Big toe 3, that's going to be my big toe 3, flood it. And this is kind of how I can get away with not really weight painting. Alrighty, now we're just pretty much in the cleanup section of all of this because all of our stuff is working just how we wanted it to. So yeah, we are in the cleanup. We will have a fully animatable rig here in just a second. So let's do it. Right now, it's not great for animation because we can still grab geometry. Even though we can't do jack to it, we can still grab it, and that's not good for the animator. Okay, grab all of our geo group. Go to the attribute editor. We're going to go down until we see drawing overrides. You're going to click enable override and reference. Now we shouldn't be able to select any geometry. We should only be selecting controls, which it seems like it worked, so awesome. Next thing we're going to do is just grab our joint group and control H. That way, even if the animator still has the joints on, they can't see them, they can't select them or animate them, nothing will go wrong. Okay, now we are at the point where we're going to color our controls to get a better sense of right and left and center and all that good fun stuff. So let's go ahead and grab our cog right here. Now we are in the attribute editor. Go down to drawing overrides, enable overrides, and we can just slide the color slider. I like yellow for the center. I don't know, I just like it. Since a lot of things are connected to the cog, they inherit the yellow, which is just alright. Okay, now we're going to go to our shoulder, which it did inherit it, but let's uninherit it pretty much. I'll make it red. So then I'll make these guys red as well. And then for this side, I'll go ahead and make it a nice blue. Now we will repeat for the legs. And now we have a ton of colors, red signifying the left side and blue the right and yellow the middle. So yeah, there's that. Alrighty, so now for the very last step, crazy at this point, we just need to lock and hide our attributes we won't really be using as animators. So let's do it. We are so close, guys. Let's do it. So for example, the head. Select it, go to the channel box. Am I going to translate the head? There is a chance, honestly. Given the way that this is, I think it could lead to a cool skull or something down the road. So I'm going to leave translate there. Now, am I going to rotate the head? Absolutely. Definitely. Don't you shake your head at me. Anyway, we're going to use that. But scaling. Are we going to use scale? No. No, we're not. Invisibility. We're not going to be using that either. So we're going to grab things that we're not going to use. Right mouse button. Lock and hide selected. That way, as the animator or you or whoever comes in, you only see the values that you want them to see, and they can't mess around with things that they aren't supposed to mess around with. So we're going to do that to all of these controls. And with things like the feet, where we created a bunch of things, it'll just make it easier because, of course, we're going to translate and rotate, but we're not going to scale and change the visibility. So we're going to lock and hide those. And it puts all of our stuff on one page, so it's even better. So we'll do that to all of our controls. And guys, with that, we have ourselves a fully rigged, pretty basic T-Rex. Pretty awesome. Oh yeah! But we have tons of controls here. We have back controls, do whatever the heck we want. We have tail controls, control the hips. Oh yeah. We've got a cog, got a neck, got the head, the jaw. In terms of arms, we've got elbows, shoulders, hand translations, hand rotations, plus tons of finger controls. For the legs, it doesn't look like much, but we have tons of controls in here that we can use. We can translate, rotate, we can curl our toes, we can spread our toes side to side. We have dew claw controls. We have dew claw spread. We have RFL controls. We got our heel, got a bank, got our toe, and we've got the ball. So I think we have a very nice rig right here. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for joining, and this has been friggin' riggin' awesome. Yep, that's it for this one, guys. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See you guys later. Oh, there goes the hand. Can you give me a thumbs up? You don't really have a thumbs up. Can you give me a something? That's that's a thumbs up from Mr. Dinosaur.